Hi, Maria Mandarino here today, and this week we're going to continue the theme that we began last week, talking about the Enneagram and anger in the context of this Mars retrograde in Cancer that we're in right now. Um, and this week, we're going to actually look at it in the context of family dynamics and even ancestral trauma, ancestral healing, that type of a dynamic. So Mars retrograde in Cancer, the focus is going to be on emotional topics that has roots in family and family history. So Cancer being a water sign, so there's a lot of emotion involved in it. Also, Cancer has a lot to do with the home and the family. Um, and everything that all the safe things that happen within the confine or should happen within the confines of home and hearth, right? So that's the energy of Cancer. And then we have Mars, which is this confrontational, aggressive, assertive kind of energy that's not at all at home in Cancer. It's kind of like a little kid with a scratchy collar on a new suit. He doesn't like being there. He's a little bit irritable. It's a little bit too soft and fuzzy for Mars. And so there can be some friction coming up. And you may experience that as anger, or people around you may experience it as anger. And challenging emotions are always things to work with and grow on. So let's take a little bit of a look at that today. And then knowing, well, also that Mars being in retrograde gives us the opportunity to revisit. Retrogrades can sometimes take you back into the past. So, in terms of family dynamics, it can be an opportunity for us to revisit. Okay, so we can always take difficult transits and turn them into opportunities when we're informed, which is my whole thing with the Enneagram as well. It's like if we're Enneagram informed, we can monitor and adjust our behavior and avoid difficulties or redirect difficulties. Sometimes you can't avoid them, right? Um, so, um, so I do want to talk briefly about the Enneagram as a tool to help you understand how your anger manifests. Again, there's 9 ways to do everything. I always say that here as 9 ways to do everything, 9 ways to feel different emotions. So your Enneagram type can be a tool to help you understand how your anger manifests, what's the source of it, where it goes back to in your childhood. Um, and the different how it crosses the different personality types and their centers of intelligence. So again, there's going to be 9 reflections of this, right? 9 ways to experience this Mars transit. So that's how I overlap this work. And your shadow that you learn through your Enneagram as well as through your chart. Your shadow will teach you about your anger, has the potential to teach you about your anger. That's part of the work that I do with people as well. And if you want to take a look at the specific types, we're going to talk about some of that today. But follow me on Instagram as well, because I've been taking one type per day. Started last week. We're going to continue that through this week. So you'll learn a little bit more there. So be sure to follow me on Instagram. That link will be in the show notes. So you'll have that there. So ancestral patterns of anger and the Enneagram. We're going to do an overview first of the 3 centers and the types within each center, right? So our body types, we've got 1, 8, and 9, types 1, 8, and 9. So themes that can trigger anger for them or bring up discomfort that manifests as anger would be tied to things like justice, control, inertia. And ancestral patterns may impact their sense of physical safety and autonomy, making them more angry. So sometimes the anger that we feel isn't even our own anger, but it's just kind of it's like that glass of water that's just vibrating, right? Our glass of water has many glasses of water before us in our ancestral patterns, right? So it's not just our our own being that's vibrating. It's the beings of ancestors before us that are vibrating within us. So So for the body types, you guys were the kids who grew up feeling oppressed, controlled, misunderstood, worthless, that type of energy. And this really will depend, and that's why I'm encouraging you to go back to my Instagram to look at the individual types a little closer for this. But within the body center, within the 8, 9, and 1, these are the people that would struggle with those types of experiences growing up, right? And that's where your type forms. Your type forms from the moment that you're born when you look into the eyes of your caregiver, first caregiver, and develops until you're age 21, which is about the time when the frontal lobe of the brain forms. So it takes about 21 years for this whole thing to unravel in our Enneagram, or I should say unfold in our Enneagram. So, and then we have our heart centers, right? 2, 3, and 4, type 2, 3, and 4. And their anger is a response to feeling unseen, unloved, or acknowledged, depending on which type you are. One of those will step forward for you. And it's linked to family expectations and emotional needs for the 2s, 3s, and 4s. So these are the people who grew up in environments where children felt overlooked, inconsequential. Maybe they were also relied on too much. Maybe they were, not allowed to be children and were relied upon for little adults. Um, that can also be in this dynamic. Kids who were forced to grow up too fast and be the adult and not really have that childhood, or felt that they needed to do something in order to be noticed in their childhood, right? So this is where our type starts to take shape as we start to learn if we do A, then we can expect B. And that's how we get our needs met, right? We do this, that happens. We do this, that happens. We don't like that one. So we go back and change. And this is what happens in those first 20, 21 years of life. So then we have the head centers. 5, 6, and 7. And anger for them is usually rooted in fear, anxiety, or mental overwhelm, emotional overwhelm. And that usually will stem from family patterns that has to do with uncertainty, or a lack of security, or a lack of consistency. So these are people who grew up in settings that possibly felt unsafe, unstable, unreliable, or even violent. All right. So these are where those patterns set up. And again, they don't just happen in our lives; they happen in you know, our ancestors, the generations before, and the generations before that, and the generations before that. Right. So all of this, it's cellular memory. Right. There's enough out there these things in very different ways. Right. So again, it gets back to that idea of the glass vibrating, and if our body is the glass, right? The glass of water, we're mostly water, right? Humans are mostly made up of water. And if we're vibrating with certain things that make us angry, um, you can count on knowing that whoever came before you had some kind of a vibrational response to anger as well. And these things are cumulative and collective. So I'm going to give an ancestral example. This is a hypothetical. I'm going to use type 9 as my hypothetical. So let's say we have a type 9, developing type 9, who's growing up in a chaotic household with a parent who's an alcoholic. Let's make it a violent father, an alcoholic, violent alcoholic father who works nights, and mom is juggling the daytime shift. Okay, so mom's there by day, um, and as the youngest, this child um, is actually, I think I reversed that on you. I apologize. We have the alcoholic, violent father who is home at night with mom, who's juggling a night job. Okay. Um, and then as the youngest, this child is catching most of the abuse because they're the least empowered. Okay, there are older children in the household, let's say. They can get out. They can get out to see friends. Maybe they're even old enough to be driving, right? But the youngest one doesn't have that kind of autonomy. So the youngest one is catching most of the flack from the violent and abusive father, who's an alcoholic by night while mom's working the night shift. Okay. So in order to survive, the youngest child figures out Again, this is how they're getting their needs met because this is this unpleasant situation with the abusive parent, right? Um, and the only way to get around that is to figure out again how to get his needs met or her needs met. And for the type 9, that starts to look like, well, if I make peace, if I make dad happy, if I don't make him angry, if I merge with him and figure out what he needs, if I try to understand him, then I can figure out how to make peace. And I can quell some of the violence and some of the volatility that may go on in the home, right? And so this belief develops in the developing type 9, where they understand that this is how they can keep everyone safe, okay, by being the peacemaker. So then, as an adult, this strategy leads to relationships where they merge, and they merge themselves straight into the background because part of what the type 9 wants to do is to avoid this unpleasant situation, which feels like confrontation, right? Because violence certainly is confrontational. Um, that type 9 wants peace and avoid confrontation because if I avoid confrontation, we will have peace at all costs. It's one of the phrases that we use with type 9. So as an adult, that strategy starts to lead to relationships where they merge and they merge themselves right into the background, and they lose their voice, okay? Because their focus, their their goal is to avoid conflict in any relationship. So now you're not in a violent relationship anymore. You're not in a volatile relationship, but something feels uncomfortable. It feels confrontational, energetically even. It doesn't have to be any kind of a battle, right? But the type 9 has formatted themselves in order to meet their needs of having peace, right? Just evaporate into the background. And the lower expression of that is to numb out. That's something we talk about nines doing, is just numbing out in order to disappear. So they don't experience, well, they do experience anger, but they think they don't because they're making peace. They've just quieted the problem down with whoever they're struggling with. They've made the problem go away. But what they've done is they've made themselves go away as well. So what ends up happening is they build resentment, okay, because they've become a non-person by their own doing, okay, but they don't see it that way. They just feel that they've become a non-person. So that resentment starts to build, and it can start to really boil up, and it can really turn into explosive anger. And I've talked about this before in other episodes. When nines really get to that point where their anger does become explosive, and it's a shock to people because these are the peacemakers. These are the nice people who hate confrontation, and they'll just talk to you, and they just have these fantastic skills to kind of decompress any situation, right? And then all of a sudden they just and nobody knows where it even comes from. Um, so um, so yeah, that's how anger will unravel for a 9. And when we talk about that ancestral piece, we've got this alcoholic parent. Well, how did that happen? And then you kind of peel the layers of the onion back far enough, and you'll find that anger will feed anger upon generation. And these responses that we have, and it's not just anger, just happens to be what we're talking about this week. Um, so yeah, so that resentment becomes a reminder of suppressed chaos that they endured, and whoever endured similar chaos or related chaos before them and didn't handle it very well. And this is how we come to a point in our lives through the Enneagram where we get to say, yeah, I see this for what it is, and I know where my work begins, and I know where the generation before me didn't have the skills to do that work. And there's forgiveness work that has to happen around that anyway. But this is where the Enneagram gives you the opportunity in terms of family dynamics and ancestral healing to say, it stops here. It stops here. Can't do anything about before. Can't do anything about those other glasses that were vibrating before I even got here, but I can do something about this glass that's vibrating. And nobody else's lack of inner work is going to move forward to the next generation because I'm doing my work now. Okay, so that's how I use this work, and I encourage you to use it this way as well. I want to return back to the Mars retrograde, though, as a mirror for family triggers, and give you something to work with in in terms of the Mars retrograde and any kind of slow boiling, uncomfortable anger that can turn into a bigger kind of anger. And it really depends on where you are in your type, in your chart, most certainly, and how much work you've done, and how many tools you have to keep doing your work because the work never ends, right? We're always given opportunities to keep doing, this work. So my question to you in this next section that I'm going to talk about is, can you rewrite the stories? And it's not just your stories, but again, all the stories that have come before you, all those other vibrating, glasses of water that are behind you, that have now been absorbed into your field, right? Can you rewrite the stories? You can't rewrite the past, but you can take those stories and determine how you're going to write the story into the future. And that's not just your story, that's the generational story. That's the saying, that's you saying it stops here. It stops here isn't just you, it's the whole train behind you stops here. It's a bold thing to say, it's a courageous thing to say. It's something I encourage you to do with support. Doesn't have to be me, but do it with support. It's powerful work and it can be intense. So do it with help. So body center insight in this Mars retrograde, using the Mars retrograde as a mirror for family triggers. So your anger, if you're a body type, again, the eights, nines, and ones, your anger can be a signal to establish healthier boundaries. Um, and this is just one example. Okay, so don't get hung up on this is the only way to do this. I'm just giving you some leads to use to start to generate this work for yourself. So eights, nines, and ones, your anger can be a signal to establish healthier boundaries. So my question to you is, how can you rewrite your story to reclaim agency within family dynamics? How do you create those boundaries within, specifically within your family dynamics, or anything that might start to feel like family dynamics? So other people that may press your buttons that feel similar to what, maybe mom or dad or whoever did to you in your past, all right? How can you rewrite your story, eights, nines, and ones? How can you rewrite your story to reclaim agency within the family dynamics? And again, more of this information, if you want to really flesh this out, is going to be in the Instagram. So for the details on the types. Heart-centered insights in dealing with the Mars retrograde and family triggers. Reflect on whether your anger stems from unmet emotional needs or inherited stories about worthiness. So we have our own stories that we create. Um, I think we do those throughout our lives, but definitely informing our Enneagram, from birth to 21, right? Those stories, we're writing them for ourselves. Okay, we tell ourselves our own stories during those years. But then there's also the other stories that we hear from families about who you are, who you should be, what you'll never be good at. Those kinds of stories. Another way of saying it is the tapes that you hear in your head that other people have recorded for you. Sometimes we record our own tapes. Sometimes other people have recorded them for us and plug them in. So reflect on that anger that comes from those feelings of emotional needs that are unmet or inherited stories of your worthiness. And my question to you is, can you rewrite those stories? Okay. Same question for all these centers of intelligence. Um, 5, 6, and 7 types. 5, 6, and 7 are head centers. People are in the head center, I should say. Use this Mars retrograde to question the stories of fear or mistrust that have been passed down to you through the family line. So we always, again, we always have our own stories or tapes of fears that, things that make us fearful, things that make us not trust situations, things that make us lose faith. Um, just send us into deeper fear, make us want to get away from something that's uncomfortable. Um, but often this comes down through the family line. I think fears are really more apparent almost because we're told, well, don't do that. You can't do that alone. Or don't go there. If you go there, make sure you take your older brother with you. These are really subtle ways of people telling you. Um, to be fearful, to, showing you, demonstrating that you should be fearful in life. So, just go through those moments, the moments when those tapes could have been installed, that set you up for, being a type that is vulnerable to fear and mistrust. And look at that story as it evolved through your family line, not just through you, but through your family line. And take it back as far as you can. What do you know about your parents and how they grew up, about your grandparents and how they grew up, and your great grandparents, who, depending on where people are from, what part of the world, what wars maybe did they experience? Did they grow up through the Depression? These types of questions, right? So you can't change those things. We don't, frankly, I don't think we want to change those things. I believe we can examine and grow from those things, um, and consider that glass of water that we are in a new context and all of the molecules of water before us, that are, vibrating as well. So consider, where does this fear come from? Where does this mistrust come from beyond you? Okay, you want to look at yours, but where does it come from beyond you? And can you rewrite these stories? Not the past, the picking up with the past and going forward. How can you rewrite the story in a new way, that will heal the generations of fear and mistrust, and to go back to the body centers and the heart centers, in order to heal these feelings of not being worthy, in order to reclaim agency and feel that you have agency again. How can you rewrite the stories not from the past, honoring the past, and going forward now that you have the insight, the awareness, the tools, you can write the future and say, the ancestral patterns stop here. Thank you for what you brought to me. Thank you for the awareness. Thank you for what you taught me, but we're writing it different now. Okay. So these are all things that you can do, that will benefit the next generation. Right. Um, so you can certainly take these ideas into journaling. I encourage you to do that. But then I'm going to go a little further with this in a journaling or a visualization exercise. I want you to imagine releasing your anger back into your ancestral line, but with compassion, kind of similar to what I just said, with compassion and gratitude for what it's not only taught you, but for how it's evolved through your own lineage. Because we're really talking, lineage is not a word we use in our culture. It's a word I use in my work as an acupuncturist. Everything that I do is lineage, right? But we all have our lineage, for better or worse, and family dynamics are often quite hard, right? But it's our lineage. It's what we've been handed. So, acknowledging that. I don't even want to say honoring, because depending on what your history is, that might be asking too much. But acknowledging it, um, which I think can be a form of honoring, but not honoring in terms of like worshiping something. I don't mean that. Acknowledging it. Okay, acknowledging what has come back through your ancestral line that has maybe brought a vein of anger into your reality, and that you don't want to carry forward, right? But how do you release something if you don't first acknowledge it's there? So that's kind of what I'm saying is like, imagine releasing that anger in your ancestral line with compassion and gratitude. But first, you have to be able to say, I see it. I don't approve of it unless you do, but most people would say I don't approve of it. Um, and then say, if you can, if it feels right, say thank you. Um, and if it doesn't feel right, don't say thank you, but say this stops with me here because I see it and I call it and it stops with me here. And then in the journaling, here's the next steps. Tell how. Tell how it's going to stop with you. Um, I would steer clear of the why, but the how is where your power is going to come from because those are your action steps in this, right? And Mars is a planet of action, right? The higher octave of Mars is um, is action, getting things done, right? The lower octave of Mars is anger and rage and war, right? So we can use Mars just like we can use our Enneagram, right? You can use the higher self in the Enneagram, or you can be stuck in your shadow. We always have a choice once we're informed. So you're informed of that Mars energy in an emotional house, which is Cancer, right? An emotional sign. Um, and that has to do with family and family lineage and history because it's we have Mars retrograde in there, right? So there's a lot happening in that house right now. So this is where you get to tell the story of the next evolution of this energy because anger, frankly, is I think it's unavoidable for us as humans, but it's what we do with it that's where a choice comes in. So what do we do with it? I think to say you're not angry is probably a form of spiritual bypassing. We'll probably save that for another another episode because that's a whole other topic. But anger is natural, and anger in this phase that we're in right now is really natural. Okay, but it's what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it in the context of your Enneagram? Are you going to be in shadow? Are you going to be in higher self? Are you going to be in the shadow of, the Mars transit? Or are you going to use this to get to the higher octave? Are you going to use this to break um, generational patterns? Are you going to do this work? Um, and this just came to me, this is the work of the warrior, right? So Mars is the warrior god, right? So yeah, this is the work of the warrior. Um, so phrases, I'm going to give you some phrases. And with each one of the, whichever one is yours, depending on your type. Helen Palmer, who is one of the modern teachers of the Enneagram. I'm trained in her style. And if you've watched me long enough, you know I'm kind of out of the box, but I was trained in that style and have integrated a lot of other things that I do with my Enneagram work. But as Helen Palmer says, and I love this, and I do this with the people that I do work with, um, as I give you these phrases, breathe in and down. So drop your energy. First of all, if you're a head type, take it out of your head. Heart centers, drop it out of your heart. Body centers, take it even lower into your feet. Okay. So breathe in and down with whatever phrase is your phrase for your Enneagram type until you're taking it into your essence. Try to feel it down to your cells. Okay. Just breathe it in and down. Don't let it get gummed up here. Don't let it get trapped here. Breathe it in and down. Type 1. Your phrase is write a permission slip for my imperfection. Type 2, let go and trust that everyone is cared for. Type 3, rest and repair, but really mean it. Don't be the person who's the best one at resting. Okay? If you're a type 3, you know what I'm talking about. Don't be the best rester. Okay? But rest and repair, really mean it. Type 4, compassion for other and for yourself. Okay, type 4 is a really good at compassion. Remember to bring it back to yourself, um, because that's part of what you didn't get, um, was compassion. Type 5, Move your body so you can give your mind a rest. Okay? Get your mind off of the hamster wheel, get your body moving. Type 6, keep faith and trust and speak what you know. Okay, that one's usually tough. The speaking part is usually tough for the 6. So take it in the steps that you need to take it in. And if you're doing this to journal, the head types are probably going to reason this out easier on paper than the other types. Um, you'll find you'll find the kernel of truth that if there is something for the 6 to speak to, in terms of trust, in terms of trusting and speaking what you know, um, it'll probably come through the journaling. Okay. Type 7, hit the pause button and stay where you are until the discomfort pauses. So it probably means not engaging in whatever is angering you and also not running away from it, right? So it's that kind of fight or flight, which we don't really think of that for the 7. I think all types do fight or flight in their own way, but yeah, just hit the pause button and be where you are for now. Okay. Don't run from it and don't try to engage with it. Type 8. This is what I've been practicing with a few 8s that I work with. It's okay to just see what happens when someone else leads. Kind of hard to do when everybody's angry. Um, but because you've got the 8 getting angry too. So you've got people around you who might be angry. The 8's building up anger and resentment. And because they might feel vulnerable by being controlled. They want to take control back, right? So let's just see what happens when you let others lead. Let's see, maybe it won't be bad. Okay. And breathe. So I'm going to repeat that Helen Palmer breathe in and down for the 8s because it's going to be hard for you to do. Type 9. It's okay for you to take up some space and be seen and heard. So not only is it okay, that's going to be downright uncomfortable for you to do, because you're going to want to numb out. Um, so, um, so yeah, just even say those words to yourself out loud. It's okay to take up some space and be seen and heard. So those are your phrases for all of the 9 types. If you want to journal through them again, I encourage you to do that. I hate to say especially the head types, but I'm probably going to say especially. I think you all should do it, but especially the head types. I think you're going to come to a different kind of clarity by writing. Using anger to break your cycles. Um, be sure be sure to check the link first of all on the video that will be probably up in that direction on the screen. I do have a previous episode on anger, so if you haven't seen that, hopefully you have, because this will be a little more meaningful. But if you haven't, check that out. Again, check out my Instagram posts and reels for the past week and this week coming as well. And remember, anger is real. Okay. And it can be productive and transformative. Again, this is that, the higher octave of Mars, right? Angry, anger doesn't have to be volatile and damaging. Okay. It's how we play it. It's what we do with it. It's what it's true of anything, right? Any negative emotion, it's what you do with it, right? So anger, remember that anger is real and can be productive and transformative. And let your anger be used as a powerful teacher right now during the Mars retrograde. Use that anger to process and grow. Rather than put your energy into suppressing it and just having it explode. And you have the ability to transform not only your anger, but your ancestral karma, because a lot of what, mindless expressions of anger, people that are not watching this channel, I would say generations of rage are screaming through them. Okay. And probably for each one of us too. But again, we have tools. We're making choices. If you're watching this, you're working on yourself, right? But it doesn't mean that you're not also carrying the history of your ancestral karma as well. It's not just your anger. Almost never. Um, and just remember, anger can move what is stuck. That's something we even talk about in Chinese medicine. You guys know I'm an acupuncturist as well, right? So sometimes I encourage people to get in touch with their anger because it can get things unstuck. It can move energy, which ends up being constructive or healing, right? Not easy, but constructive and healing. I do invite you to understand and learn more about your Enneagram type, to deepen your self-awareness, and your healing within family dynamics. All right. So there's a few ways you can do that here. My free webinar, you can go onto my website. I'll have all these links in the show notes, mariamandarino.com. I have a free webinar there on 9 ways to create healthy boundaries and improve your relationships with the Enneagram. So that's available for you for free. My online course, Smart But Stuck, Free Yourself Through the Enneagram, that's also available on the website. You can work with me privately in a few different ways. I have a free discovery call you can sign up for and learn a little bit more about that. You may want to work with me in spiritual direction. You may want to do formal Enneagram typing with me. And an astrological chart. We can take a look at that as well. I also have another type of session where we integrate spiritual direction on a regular basis with looking at your chart on it's a monthly basis where we do that. So all of that information is on my website. I will have, all of these links for you. I also encourage you to sign up for my email. This way, we can remain in touch, and any specials that come up or any other courses. All of that will be made known through my email. I don't spam you. If you get one email from me a month, it's probably a lot. Um, it's not a real fancy operation here. It's me. You're looking at the whole staff. So maybe there'll be an email a month, unless something unique is going on, and you might get a few, when a special course is being run. All right, so that's it for now. Remember to check the other episode on anger, at the end of this, and check out the Instagram. Remember to sign up for the email list, and I will see you here next time. Take care. Bye.